48,
Late
that's Series 1 Land Rover. That's
Yeah.
a cracker, isn't it?
Yeah.
Should we go down and have a just look at it?
Right.
Because I think it's something that Great Britain's got to be very proud of, the production of the Land Rover. Although it wasn't necessarily Rover's idea. Of course, the Jeep was so popular and commonplace during the war that Rovers had the great idea, said, we'll produce something like that, didn't they? And this is the old original, what would that be, 80-inch wheelbase one, I think, one of the short ones.
They were, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not sure of the actual terms of
They
it.
were actually built with the same wheelbase as the Jeep. Of course, the engine was more sophisticated. Instead of that old 2.2-litre sidewall, they put an overhead inlet side exhaust, which they were using in their Rover 75s, wasn't it?
Right.
4-speed gearbox. It's a more sophisticated thing than the Jeep. But here we've got the Jeep and the Land Rover, the forerunners of today's 4x4s, and we see plenty of them now by people who don't really need 4x4, but they are still very much so. But that's a fine example of the old Series 1, isn't it?
And people might make the comment that the Japanese make them, they don't give the
We
same
always
thing.
invented them though, didn't we?
But even so, you see plenty of old Land Rovers still working. You don't see plenty of old Japanese ones still working.
I wish I knew the figure, but there is a high percentage of all the Land Rovers ever produced still on the road today.
No, don't doubt it.
That's a sound I hope never goes away.
I don't think it ever will it?
Right, we've got another sort of baler here. Did you say a Jones baler?
It is a Jones baler. This was built in North Wales originally by the Jones family. They ventured into balers. They used to make stationary balers originally, and then they moved on into this in the early 40s, I think, was about the time they started on it. And this one was much different to most balers in that you had to straddle the swath and the pickup towed directly behind the tractor. It was much easier to get around through narrow gateways. But it was not an outstanding success, I would say, although...
Was it not?
No.
Neither was the other. Was there a baler that was an outstanding success? I suppose they all had their little problems and you had to learn to live around them.
Yeah, mainly because the operators of the time never bothered to read the instruction books properly and various things, and lack of maintenance caused a lot.
Still happens in this computer era now, Brandon.
Yeah.
Now then, we're over to another tractor name now, the John Deere.
This is
Something always identified by its colour, the old flat twin engine there.
A real big boy. This is the John Deere G, which was the largest of the twin cylinders that John Deere ever made.
Was it?
And
Beautiful example, wasn't it?
this would have only been operated by either a very wealthy farmer or an agricultural contractor. Not many people would have been able to justify the expense of this.
Quite an expensive tractor, even in its day.
Yes.
So what would this be? Sort of just post-war?
That's just late 40s.
Any idea what price they would be then?
I would hazard a guess. A standard Fordson during the war was controlled at £125.
Yeah.
And I expect this tractor would have been 600.
Well, that's a big difference in it. Like you say, you had to be
brave.
The Rolls-Royce tractor, this one, isn't it?
That's right. This baler here is a rather oddball one. I don't recall ever seeing many of these. It's made by Bamfords of Uttoxeter and with an Armstrong Siddeley diesel engine put on the top. But I don't think it was a great success story, and I don't think very many of them ever got sold.
That's why you hadn't heard about it then,
That's
Francis.
right.
You deal with a more common stock, I can see. Now this is a bit more familiar to you.
This is the New Holland again, which was a progression on after the one I showed you just now with the canvases and the Wisconsin engine. They then moved on to this to do away with the canvases, which I can assure you I've operated one of these as well, and this is a very hungry baler. You can keep chucking hay in there as fast as you like all day long.
And it'll work.
It'll stick it.
Keep going. Slightly smaller now.
We have here a David Brown pickup baler. This is a rather unusual beast. I have sold some of these new in my early days with tractor selling. The bale is actually ejected out the side of the baler as opposed to practically all the other balers eject them at the back.
What was the idea of that?
Well, it makes it rather more compact.
Yeah.
you can actually fold the bell chamber around, and then you've got a very compact machine for transportation on the road. It also was just, every manufacturer tried to have something different, to have a sales gimmick, to be honest.
And that would apply to some farmers, and that's where the sales went. And
were-
you as salesman, of course, you had to latch on to all these little gimmicks to
Well, that's right, you had to make use of what you had to sell.
help the old commission, didn't it?
Well, it helped, didn't it? Yeah.
Every little helps.
We've now come to a rather unusual bit of kit with which I'm not really very familiar, but this is a reaper and binder, which is sort of more of use during the 1920s,
As old as that?
but this one would not be that old.
Oh.
This is one that's been imported somewhere. Sorry, it
Blair
comes
Gowrie
from
from
Scotland.
Yeah.
It probably has been adapted in some way to cope with modern reed combing requirements. I think it's probably a baler, a reaper rather, that would have been used in the 1930s and 40s, but has been adapted in a different way. And I'm sorry,
And that end bit would have folded
that
down.
would have folded down for
Because I can
transport.
see the wooden piece, what they call the wooden piece that sort of guided through there.
Sails.
That's the
they're called.
sails. Ah.
Yeah. The sails brought the corn back onto the canvases to
I
be
see.
taken up and stacked.
Well, we've been talking about haymaking and harvesting, but that's not the only thing that farmers throw about, is it?
No,
We got the
indeed not.
dung spreader. Of course, the champion dung spreader, he come from Somerset.
That's
didn't
right.
So-
Rackerbilk. No, it wasn't. It was, sorry, not
he? The
Ackerbilk.
Wurzels.
Yeah, can't think of his name for a minute. This
Adge Cutler. you're
Adge
trying to
Cutler
think
was
of.
the man.
So you tell us about the dung spreader.
Right. This is a conventional dung spreader of about the 1940s and 50s, which you would have probably, in the early days, loaded it by hand, go out in the field and just, this one actually drives off the power
By prong,
takeoff.
not by hand.
Yes, yeah, by prong.
I know what you mean.
And the dung is conveyed back to those
Yeah.
flickers at the back, and it just chucks it out and makes a very good job.
And she's driven through a shaft that's
The shaft from the
drive on the
tractor.
back of the tractor.
There were also similar spreaders of this time that were driven off of the land wheels as well.
Oh, were there?
Mm.
So she'd take up a couple of ton on there, I should think.
About a couple of tons.
Yeah,
would
I
be
should think so,
plenty,
because
yeah.
weighs heavy, doesn't it?
It does heavy.
Well then, we're getting on in age with the tractors now. This is a nice unrestored version of the old Fordson Major. What years did these come out? 45, 46?
Yes, just after World War II. Same engine as the standard Fordson,
Yeah.
but independent brakes, which they not had, and three-point linkage was an option. And power takeoff was an option.
And that three-point linkage was the old Ferguson system, because Fords once were the financiers. There was a bit of a controversy there about the patent, wasn't there?
A big war.
A big war, yeah. And these had self-starters too, some of them, didn't
Oh
they?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
You could have electric start. Again, on this one we've got a dung loader, which is probably what was used to load that
The load,
spreader.
Yeah.
Which again, I mean, nowadays they have telescopic handlers and all manner of things, but
Nobody works hard.
not
Like the NI did
not,
years
not
ago.
like the NI. No.
It's lovely to see this machinery all unrestored too, isn't it? It takes you back to that era. You go to some of the rallies and everything all polished and cleaned up. People don't realise how old the stuff is. What have we got around the corner?
That's an old root drill. No, sorry, that's a corn drill.
Corn drill.
That would have been initially pulled with horses, and then the tractor drawbar would have been an adaptation probably in the 40s.
So that's quite no job there. Quite no one.
That drill, I would imagine, would have been built in the 20s.
Would it?
It's about that
When you
sort of
box
look.
along there, that's to contain
That's
your
right.
seed.
Man rides on the back,
Yeah.
on the wooden plank, which the health and safety boys would not, sort of take too funny today. He would lift the drill at the headlands and let it back down when they turned to go back in again.
But when you think a lot of the conditions we worked in those days, the health and safety lads of today would have a fit, wouldn't they?
Oh, they would. You imagine working on a thrashing machine, cutting strings to put into the
Yeah,
your
exactly.
hand is within a few inches of
Inches
that
of, yeah.
thrashing mill.
But we learned to be careful in those days. Something else unrestored Lovely example of the old standard Fords in here. And what's this adaptation on the front here?
This would probably have been operated by an agricultural contractor. It has a big winch on the back and would have been used for mould draining, which is what the plough
Oh, that's
does.
the mould drainer plough.
And that,
Yeah.
that is really a mould draining outfit.
Now with the mould drainer, they used to dig right down under the ground, didn't they, and dig right the way through, sort of go down in and like a bullet-shaped thing on there, isn't it?
This trips and goes down into the ground, and this bullet goes along and this expander behind it, and then you have whatever depth you go down to, which would probably be about 2 foot, would be a hole that lot size right through the land, and the water would run into that hole and out into the ditches.
Very necessary around the levels in this area,
That's
I suppose.
right. You would normally have sort of dropped it in the ditch and then pulled away gradually up through the field so that the flow would go down to the ditch.
That's interesting. We didn't have anything like that on the Mendips. You couldn't get down. You couldn't get down that deep on the Mendips.
You didn't need it.
No, that's right. The water ran out. That's where the water come from here, running off the Mendip. Now then, a bit of Bamfords here, and this is getting to the sophisticated style of cutting grass now.
Well, this was really an upmarket version of the mower of the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, yeah.
It had rubber tires because people tended to run the roads a bit more.
Yeah.
Apart from that, it didn't serve any useful purpose. But it is a conventional mower which would have been used, that type of machine would have been used probably for 60 years, I would think.
Is that a bit bigger than the horse-drawn ones, or the same size?
Most horse-drawn ones were 4'6" if a horse had to put it. That is 5'6".
I thought you looked a bit bigger.
They did have 5'6" horse-drawn mowers, but you always had to have 2 horses to pull it, or else an engine to drive the cutter.
Yeah, yeah. Which not many farmers went to that luxury, did they?
No, no.
Another of our tractors with the loader on the front. This time we got Nuffield. Yes. Now, Nuffield, of course, was Lord Nuffield, wasn't he?
That's right.
Sir William Morris of Morris Motors. And they didn't make a tractor till after the war, did they? I understood, you can correct me, they started building tractors in the factory where the old army lorries were built. Because the production of army lorries dropped after the war, this is the same factory that they set up for the tractors.
I wasn't sure about that bit of history, but this is a tractor of the late 50s, but they started in the sort of late 40s.
Yeah, they tried to compete with Fords, didn't they? And with Ferguson. They tried to build something. Well, everybody was trying to capture a market.
There was a vast market for tractors.
This would have been challenging the major, obviously.
Yeah.
The later major.
Yeah. I think the market for tractors in the 50s was something like 40,000 units a year in this country.
Yeah, yeah.
It's now down to 10,000.
Is that so?
Mm.
Well, another make of tractor we became familiar with during World War II was, of course, the Alice Chalmers. They sent over those little lightweight jobs that we were very doubtful about the toughness of them, but turned out to be a very good firm. But what's this particular model?
This is the Model A,
yeah,
which was a very big engine in the back end of an Alice U, which was their sort of Fordson standard equivalent of.
Yeah.
And this was a very expensive tractor to buy and was generally only operated by thrashing contractors because it was too big for
pulling big machinery around and be not just an ordinary farm tractor.
No.
But we never imagined things that big on a farm in those days, did we?
Again, this is of similar but even bigger power than the the International W9 and the Case LA.
Yeah.
But even this was a bit bigger than that.
That's a big 4-cylinder motor in there, isn't it?
It's a big brute.
And this is the same model?
Same model, yeah. I don't very often see two together.
No. Now then, Francis, you keep confusing me by the minute. Now, I thought gripes were something we used to get as kid and Mother used to give us gripe water. This is a griping plough.
This is a griping plough in Somerset. The drainage system on most of the lower land, hundreds and thousands of acres of Somerset, are only just above sea level, and they have what they call ridge and furrow, and the furrow is a hollow, which they call it in this locality a gripe. And to keep that gripe in shape, this was built by Twos of Tiverton, and it does in fact go down through the gripe and cuts two slices of just only a small 4-inch by sort of 8-inch, like the furrow a plough would do.
Yeah.
And then these two discs, just throw it up on the bank. The end of story. That thing can proceed all day. The option is a man with a shovel for weeks and weeks.
Anything but hard work, isn't it? Well done. Thanks for that. Well, you know as well as I do, Francis, old Mike's a proper magpie when it comes to collecting, and the stuff he's got here really is amazing. And we've been talking about a few makes of tractors, including internationals, but nothing as old as this.
No, I think this is the oldest in his collection. This is the International 1020, which first came on stream in about 1923 and went right through until the late 30s.
But virtually unchanged.
With very little in the way of changes at all. It was a serious competitor to the standard Fordson, and although it was more money, Henry Ford gave up making tractors in the late 20s or early 30s. I think it was the late 20s. He did then start again in Cork in Ireland in 1933.
I remember the old Irish model, yes.
But the International is the one that gave him the most run for his money.
Oh, she's going back a bit. But just another example of what Mike has here.
Yes,
I begin to wonder if he knows how many tractors, bits and pieces he has got.
I have asked him and he doesn't know.
Oh, well, we'll move on. What's this here with Wuffler on the side then?
Well, this is a more modern tedder.
Yes, let me head over there.
This is made by Bamfords in the late 50s and all through the 60s, and this was a very, very popular machine in Somerset. It's a single row tedder, but by closing the doors at the back and with the power takeoff and the way it worked, it would in fact present the swath in a lovely manner. And it would dry very quickly. It stood the swath up in such a way that the air could draw through it and dry very, very fast.
Perfection at last.
It was.
What have we got behind then?
Well, I don't rightly know. I think that, by the look of it, it had a water tank on it.
Yes,
and I imagine it was a tanker that was used to bring water for steam ploughing engines and that sort of thing. They would have used them in a massive amount of water. So I would imagine that's what it was.
No, just a remnant. Somebody will do it up one day.
Oh, it's still a bit of old...
That's the thing about all these things. Somebody will find a story there and do it up. And
if somebody doesn't keep it, then it's gone forever, isn't it?
Gone forever. We can't afford for that to happen, can we? Francis, you said this was worth a mention. Tell us.
Right, this baler was very, very popular in this area. Came on stream in the late 40s, 46, 47, 48. And this was built in Britain by the International Harvester Company. It was called the McCormick B45 and was probably the highest volume seller of a baler that I ever remember in those times. Well, another interesting part is this bale sledge on the back here. If I could just show you how a man had to